Tony Beats came here and he gave me an offer on this ground to buy everything, and it's a really good offer. Parker's offer, who knows, that might be the answer for the future. There's a lot to think about.
Pretty soon, or we're going to be shutting down the plant.
420 ounces short, days of season left. $1 million already buried in dirt that gave back nothing, and two of the richest men in the Klondike waiting with a 7-figure check for his claim. Rick Ness had one cut left and a valley that was already freezing shut, and every miner in the Yukon had quietly written him off.
No pay this week, because someone had to keep breaking trucks so I couldn't reach my goal.
Then the last cleanup of the year hit the scale in a bar in Keno. The first weight came up so low, the room stopped breathing, and what happened next put over $1 million of gold on that table in a single count. The worst spot he'd ever been in, the clearest measure of how bad things had become, was not in the numbers. It was in the way Rick Ness spoke when nobody was performing for the camera. The plant had run out of pay. The ground feeding it had given up everything it intended to give. An old debt was still hanging over the operation, one he had been trying to clear as quickly as the gold allowed, and the gold had not been allowing much. "This is one of the worst spots I've ever been in," he said. That's not a line for television. That's a man doing math in his head at 3 in the morning and not liking the answer. Rick had been in the industry long enough to recognize a bad year from the inside. He had run iron for other people. He had left a steady position to bet everything he had on ground of his own.
You know, you're all tired from it and giving it all you got, but we're still way off from our target, and that'd be devastating if we're short.
He had lived through seasons where the equipment was older than the men running it, and the wages came out of his pocket before they came out of the dirt. He knew what pressure felt like, and this was worse than anything he had a comparison for. What made it worse was that the crew could feel it too. Rick is normally the lightest presence on his own property, the one cracking jokes while somebody welds, the one insisting that laughing at the disasters is the only thing that stops them from compounding. When that man admitted out loud that he was nervous, everybody in camp heard it, and everybody in camp started doing the same arithmetic he was doing. The arithmetic was brutal. His season goal stood at 1,800 ounces. Against a gold price of roughly $4,000 an ounce, that goal represented something in the region of $7.25 million for the season, and it was the number every commitment he had made was built on top of. He was nowhere near it. "We're 420 ounces shy of our goal yet," he said, and added that it was a lot of ounces, and there was not a lot of time left to find them. 420 ounces. Roughly $1.7 million at that same rate, still sitting somewhere in unbroken ground, in a territory that was already starting to freeze. The $1 million hole. To understand a gap that size, it helps to understand where the season's money went, because it did not evaporate. It went into a hole. Earlier in the year, Rick made the biggest single call of his mining career. He looked at the ground he was working, looked at the production it was giving him, and decided the conservative path was never going to carry him to 1,800 ounces.
We're running out of time, so I think we need to give a little more, and I think we need to get back to Lightning Creek.
So, he committed to opening a massive new cut, and by his own account, the investment ran to roughly $1 million. That figure is his characterization rather than a line item audit, but the scale of the commitment is not in dispute. What a commitment like that actually involves is rarely visible on screen. Before a single ounce can be recovered, the overburden has to come off. That means excavators and rock trucks running full shifts to strip the barren material sitting on top of the pay layer, sometimes many meters of it, and hauling it far enough away that it does not have to be moved twice. It means fuel burned by the thousands of liters in machines that consume it, whether they are digging pay or digging waste. It means service hours accumulating on iron that only has so many hours in it before something expensive fails. It means a crew of a handful of men spending week after week producing nothing recoverable on the promise that what lies underneath will justify all of it. and it means the thing nobody can buy back. Every day spent stripping that cut was a day not spent washing pay dirt somewhere else. In a business where the productive window is measured in a few short months, money is bad to lose, but time is worse, because you can borrow money and you cannot borrow August. When the crew finally reached the layer that was supposed to justify the whole exercise and ran the material through the plant, the result was not disappointing. It was close to nothing. That was a big debacle, Rick said. A huge waste of money and time.
Ryan, you got a copy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just ripped floor out of a bucket on that 460. It's completely gone.
There is no recourse for that. No insurance product covers a cut that does not pay. No appeal exists. The dirt owed him nothing, and it paid him accordingly. That single decision is the entire explanation for the 420-ounce gap. Remove that cut from the season, and Rick is comfortably on pace, running a perfectly normal year. Instead, he was standing in the cold, doing the mental accounting on what the failure had cost the men who worked for him. And the answer to that was not a number he wanted to say out loud, yet. The vultures circle. Word of a struggling operation does not stay inside its own property line. In the Klondike, everyone knows everyone else's production before they have finished counting their own, and a claim that was never for sale becomes extremely interesting the moment its owner looks stretched. Two names in that valley have the capital to act on that kind of interest. Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel both came to Rick with an offer, and by Rick's own description, it was a 7-figure amount. He did not disclose the exact number, and neither of them confirmed one publicly. So, what is known is the shape of it, rather than the sum. Enough money that he admitted openly it was tough to ignore. It is worth understanding why that ground appealed to them at all. A struggling operation and a bad claim are not the same thing. What a buyer with capital acquires in a deal like that is not a season of production. It is permitted, proven, accessible ground with the water infrastructure and the access roads already in place, and with the expensive early work of proving where the pay run's already paid for by somebody else. A large operation can absorb ground that a small one cannot make work, because a large operation can put 4 times the iron on it and run it for a fraction of the cost per yard. The same dirt that is punishing for a crew of a few men can be routine for a fleet. That asymmetry is exactly why the offers came when they did, and it is exactly why a seller in Rick's position has almost no leverage. Because that is the real cost of being 420 ounces down. It is not just the missing gold. It is that everyone negotiating with him could see the missing gold too. The vultures are circling right now, but I'm not panicking yet, Rick said. The temptation was genuine, and he never pretended otherwise. Taking the offer would have cleared the old debt, ended the payroll anxiety, and closed the book on a year that had punished him from the first week. He turned it over out loud, admitted that maybe it was time to go, and then landed on the other side of it for a reason that had nothing to do with stubbornness about selling. If he hit the goal, the operation was proven and the profits could keep improving, and in that case, there was no reason to leave at all. Selling 420 ounces short and selling after clearing 1,800 would put the same money in his account. Same money, completely different man. So he said no for the moment and went back to the only leverage he had left, which was dirt, water, and a crew that had not walked off yet. The problem was that the dirt he had left was the last of it.
I mean, I've seen it happen before. I didn't think this one was there. I knew it was getting thin.
Looks like it's been patched together before.
So what's gonna be the quickest?
The last chance cut. Everything now funneled into a single piece of ground, and the name the crew used for it was not written by an editor. They called it the last chance cut. The crew were digging toward pay, and the final 10 feet were the hardest 10 feet on the property. That is the depth where the gravel tightens up, where the buckets fill slower, where machine hours stopped translating into yards at anything like the rate they did higher up. 10 feet sounds like nothing. At the end of a season, with cold iron and shortening daylight, 10 feet can take days that do not exist. Rick also knew that even a good result there might not be enough on its own. 420 ounces from one untested cut is an enormous ask, and hoping was not a plan. So he did what he has always done when the conventional route runs out of road, and he drew up something risky. A second front, opened at the worst possible point in the calendar, to give the season 2 chances instead of 1. He said it would be a fight, and that with the crew all in on it, he believed they could get there. That phrase carried more weight than any machine on the property. Rick does not have Parker's fleet or Tony's accumulated decades of iron and infrastructure. What he had was a small crew who had stayed through a season that had given them every reason to leave, which meant the plan only existed if they agreed to it. And he had to ask them for more at the exact moment they had least left to give. The talk. There is a particular kind of meeting a boss calls when he is about to ask for more than he has any right to ask for. Everyone attending knows what is coming, and most of them already know how they will answer, and it still has to be said out loud. Rick started with thanks, because it was the only honest place to start. The men in front of him had fixed machinery in weather that had no business being worked in, run long shifts whenever the plant behaved, and watched their employer lose a fortune in a dead cut and turned up the next morning regardless. Then he gave them the position without decorating it. They were tired, they had been giving everything they had, and they were still a long way from target. Missing it would be devastating, and he used that word. Then he gave them the belief, because a leader who only delivers bad news does not get another push out of anybody. He told them the gold would be in that dirt, that it would come down to the bitter end, and that the answer was to give a little more. And then he named the plan. One last push back down at Lightning Creek. Nobody in that circle argued. Nobody said it could not be done. What none of them said either was what splitting the operation would cost them if the second front came up as empty as the first one had.
Getting this permafrost out of here so we can get back into Vegas Valley.
When the iron votes, Lightning Creek was the opposite of the gamble that had put him in this position. It was proven ground, worked before, with known behavior and a known layout, and that was precisely why he chose it. After $1 million spent on unproven dirt, Rick was not in a position to guess again. What he needed was ground that had already answered the question once. The cost was in the splitting. A small crew across 2 fronts is not 2 operations. It is 1 operation running at partial strength in 2 places. Every man moved down to the creek is a man not in the cut. Machines get shuttled, which means hours lost to travel rather than production. Somebody who was maintaining the plant is now running a loader instead, which means small mechanical problems get caught late rather than early. At full season strength, with warm weather and long days, an operation absorbs that. At the end of September, with the temperature falling, it compounds. And that is where the iron started casting votes. The first came as smoke. The belt driving the cooling system on one of the machines had failed, and the machine was overheating as a result. The cause sat upstream of the symptom, the way it usually does. The tensioner had gone slack. A loose tensioner lets the belt hop instead of tracking, and a belt that hops eventually tears itself apart. And once it goes, the cooling stops and the temperature climbs until something surrenders. Hops, hops, hops. That's the sound of a season dying by inches. A tensioner is a small component and a cheap one, and a slack one takes out a belt, and a dead belt takes out the cooling, and no cooling takes out the machine, and a machine down at the end of September takes out the year. It isn't dramatic. It's a $2 part that costs you 200 ounces. The cold brought its own problems, and the cold cannot be repaired. The head drum on the conveyor stopped gripping. That drum is what converts engine power into belt movement, and in warm weather nobody thinks about it. But rubber that gets cold gets hard, and hard rubber does not catch. The belt slipped, the plant stopped, and everything behind it backed up. The fix was a Tiger torch. Heat applied by hand, one man kneeling on frozen ground, warming the drum until the rubber softened enough to remember its job. Rick called shutting down like that a killer, and he meant it literally in terms of the goal. Early in a season, an hour lost is an irritation. At that point in the year, an hour was a measurable fraction of everything he had left. This is what freeze-up actually does to a placer operation, long before the ground itself locks solid. Water lines begin to ice at the low points and have to be drained or bled continuously. Sluice runs freeze overnight and have to be thawed before the first yard goes through in the morning. Screens ice over and blind off, so material stops classifying properly and gold starts riding out the back with the tailings. Hydraulic fluid thickens and pressure comes up slowly, so machines that started instantly in July need warming time in September.
Very thankful for you. Like, you guys are incredible. Like, you keep this thing going. Like, we're having a hell of a season.
Every one of those problems is survivable on its own. Together, they eat production a quarter hour at a time until the day the wash water will not stay liquid at all. And on that day, the season is over, whether the goal has been reached or not. The torch worked, the drum warmed, the belt caught, and the crew got moving again with a joke rather than a complaint. It's not denial. It's the only fuel they've got that doesn't have to be trucked in. Rick's summary of it was that there is always something happening at that time of year, that they were still running, and that they had a long way to go. Still running was the entire ambition by then. Not comfortable, not thriving, running. And when the washing finally stopped, everything the season had left came down to a single cleanup and a single scale, which is a moment worth being subscribed for, because what came out of that last chance cut is the reason anyone is still talking about this season at all. The bar in Keno. The final gold weigh of the year took place in the only bar in Keno, which says everything about the size of the world these men operate in at the end of a season. There would be no follow-up weigh, no chance to make up a shortfall the week after. Whatever was in those containers was the answer. The mood going in was not confidence. Asked how things were looking, the honest response from the crew was that they were trying to survive the season at that point, not win it, survive it. The stakes were arithmetic, and everybody in the room could do it. The season goal was 1,800 ounces. To reach it, the last chance cut had to deliver 420. Not 400 with a good explanation attached. 420. Short of that, and the year that began with $1 million hole would end with a missed goal. No bonuses for the crew, and Rick sitting across a table from Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel, negotiating from the weakest position of his working life. Rick called it the moment of truth, and the weighing began. The count. Anyone who has sat through one of these knows the rhythm. Nobody rushes it. The weights go on one at a time, and the numbers get spoken out loud, partly for the record, and partly because at that level of tension, nobody trusts their own eyes. 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. The count climbed steadily and then settled on a figure, 131.91 ounces. And the room did the wrong arithmetic all at once, because the wrong arithmetic was the obvious one. 131 ounces is a respectable week in a normal season. At roughly $4,000 an ounce, it is over $500,000 of gold sitting on a bar table, which in almost any other context is a very good day. But it was not 420. It was not within 250 ounces of 420. Against the number that mattered, it was a failure. And every man in that room understood in the same instant what the failure meant. It meant the last chance cut had not been enough. It meant the split crew and the frozen drum and the burned belt had bought them nothing that counted. It meant no gold bonus. It meant the offers from Beats and Schnabel stopped being an option Rick could turn down and started being an outcome he would have to accept. Somebody had already begun the process of arranging their face into the expression men use when they are about to tell their boss it was still a good effort.
Yeah, we need to switch up the plan right now if we're going to get back to the pay in Vegas Valley quickly.
The air went out of the room, and then somebody said there was more. Not more pay dirt to run. More gold, already cleaned, already weighed, still sitting off the scale. 2 additional 100-ounce weights came onto the table, and the arithmetic inverted in the space of about 4 seconds. 131.91 plus 100 plus 100. 431.91 ounces. The number they had needed was 420. They had cleared it by nearly 12 ounces on the cleanup alone. At roughly $4,000 an EOI's ounce, that single wash was worth over $1,727,000, recovered from the last piece of ground Rick Ness had left. In the last days of a season, everyone in the valley had already written off. And when that cleanup was added to everything the operation had recovered since spring, the season total came to 1,811.56 ounces. The goal had been 1,811 ounces, 11 and a half to be precise, out of more than 1,800. A margin of 0.6% between the best ending of Rick Ness's career and a failure that would have followed him for years. At the going rate, the whole season came in at something over $7,246,000. The crew's verdict was that the last chance had paid off, and Rick's own reaction was that the closeness of it was ridiculous. He was right. 11 ounces is 1 good hour on a running plant. It is the difference the Tiger Torch made on the frozen head drum instead of standing the plant down for the day. It is the belt diagnosed in an hour instead of a shift. It is the decision to reopen Lightning Creek rather than sit still and hope the cut carried the whole load. Every one of those unglamorous choices is sitting inside that 11-ounce margin, and removing any single one of them turns the total into 1,700 and something, and the story into a tragedy, which left one promise still outstanding: the jars. Rick had structured the season the way he always has, with the crew's bonuses tied directly to the goal rather than to hours worked. That structure is common in placer mining, and it cuts both ways. It aligns everybody on the property to the same number, so that a man fixing a conveyor at midnight is fixing his own bonus as much as his employer's. It also means the men carry a share of the operational risk that they have no control over, and for most of that season, it was a risk that looked certain to land on them. The failed cut was not their decision. The gold price was not their decision. Missing the goal by any margin at all would have paid them exactly the same as missing it by 500 ounces. Nothing. That is what makes the moment land. Rick brought out jars, one for each man, with the bonus inside. He told them they had earned it. They told him he had earned it. He told them they had worked damn hard for it, and neither side was willing to accept the credit. One of the crew then said the thing that quietly reframed the entire year. In every season they had been with him, they had never once failed to hit the total, including this one, including the year with $1 million hole in the middle of it, buyers circling the property, rubber freezing solid on the drums, and 420 ounces to find with almost no time to find them. Nobody in that bar said the season had been easy. What none of them addressed yet was what it had actually taken out of the man who had carried it. What it cost. Afterwards, with the noise settling, Rick said the part that reframes everything that came before it. "I did not think we were going to do it, but we did it," he said. "That admission matters more than the total does." He had not been quietly holding a winning hand and performing worry for the cameras. He had genuinely believed it might not happen. He had stood in front of his crew and asked them for one more push, while privately expecting the answer to be no, because asking anyway was the only tool he had left. Hope, said out loud and on purpose, in the absence of any better instrument. He described the season as a fight that had disaster written all over it from the opening week, and he was blunt about what the industry does to the people in it over time. It takes the optimism first, then the savings, then the sleep, then the certainty. It takes the $1 million a man was completely sure about. It takes the belt, the tensioner, and the feeling in his hands. And then occasionally, right at the end, when there is nothing left to give it, it hands something back. What it handed back this time was not just a total. It was the one thing he had needed before he could answer the offer still sitting on the table. On his own terms. Because the offer from Tony Beets and Parker Schnabel had not gone anywhere. Rick had not refused it permanently. He had refused it at that particular moment, and the difference is the whole point. "I'm going to leave on my own terms," he said, adding that if the offers were still there when that time came, then that would be that. That is not defiance, and it is not sentimentality about the claim. It is a clear-eyed reading of what a transaction says about the person on the selling side of it. Selling at 420 ounces short is selling as a cautionary tale. Selling at 1,811 ounces is selling as a man who hit the number he committed to in the worst year of his working life, with a crew who would follow him into the next one. He kept the option open. He simply refused to exercise it from the floor. His own summary was that getting through that year meant they could get through any year, which is either the most reassuring thing a miner can say or the most ominous, depending on what the next season decides to do to him. Why this one hits different. There are far bigger numbers on this show. Parker Schnabel counts production in the tens of thousands of ounces. Tony Beets has decades of iron and infrastructure standing behind him. On a straight scoreboard, 1,811 ounces does not lead the Klondike. But very few operators have come that close to losing everything and then not lost it. 11 ounces stood between full bonuses and empty jars, between a boss who kept his word and one who had to explain why he could not, between selling ground on his own terms and selling it on somebody else's. And it arrived in a single cleanup, on the last dirt he had, in front of men who had every reason to be somewhere warmer. The gold does not care about anybody's plan. It does not care about the millions spent looking for it in the wrong place. It sits in the ground and waits, and it only ever pays the people who are still digging when the clock runs out. So, here's the question worth arguing about in the comments. Was Rick right to turn down a 7-figure check and grind out a season that came down to 11 ounces? Or was walking away with guaranteed money the smarter call, and he simply got lucky enough that nobody will ever call it a mistake?